Alright, Nishant, can you tell us a bit about what you do? Just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Nishant Shah. I am the Director for Research at a Bangalore-based research organization called the Center for Internet and Society. We are the only organization in Asia which is kind of looking at the relationships between the emergence of internet technologies and what are the kinds of changes it produces in the social, the cultural and the political landscape of the region.
Let's see. And can you tell us a bit about what your company does and where it's based?
Sure, we are a not-for-profit research organization, so we are basically trying to defend the rights of the citizens and the consumers, but also trying to look at different kinds of technology-mediated practices, so that there is a new generation, for example, which is coming up, which is growing up with digital technologies rather than is just learning digital technologies in school or something, right? Mm-hmm. What we call digital natives.
Can you explain what digital natives are?
There are many conflicting definitions of what digital native is. There is a whole lot of people who are basically more into marketing and identifying a demography who suggest that people born after the 1980s are digital natives. These are people who did not have to learn new digital technologies but who grew with digital technologies as a part of their lives. We are trying to kind of contest that definition and try and suggest that digital natives are people whose lives are significantly affected by the presence of technology, and hence the way they think of themselves, the way they relate to the outside community, the way they make friends, they date, they fall in love and perhaps live their lives is significantly affected by the presence of digital technologies. So a digital native is not just somebody who is young. A digital native is not somebody who is essentially a power user and spends all his or her life on Facebook and MySpace and Plurk. But a digital native is somebody who recognizes that the presence of technology has changed their life significantly. And it can be either in the domain of life and living and everyday practices, but it can also sometimes be in the domain of labor, something that we in Asia understand so well now because we have become the outsourcing capital for the rest of the world. Right? So that access to digital technologies and work leads to new kinds of lifestyles, new kinds of consumptions, new ways of looking at the government, new ways of democracy and participation and so on. And sometimes it's also at the level of language, in terms of how English is suddenly becoming the global language, but there is an economic kind of background to it, there is also a political background to it and so on. So we're trying to look at all these different kinds of domains and the way it transforms people's lives, and that's what a digital native is about.
And apart from talking about internet networks, how that affects people's lives, is there any other examples that you can give?
One of the perhaps most interesting examples, and that is the Digital Natives workshop that we're doing, is invited somebody who's been working with young children in slums in India. Right? There's lots of slums, like people who don't have formalized housing, people who sometimes live below the poverty line. We're talking about people who live on less than $1 a day. Right? And they still have certain ways by which they access technology. So that in New Delhi, which is the capital of India, now that we are hosting the New Asian Games, a lot of slums got cleared during the last 2 or 3 years to build infrastructure so that we can have good games in a city. So how do now people living in the slums use digital technologies, which they don't really own because they don't have personal computers, but they can use cyber cafes, which are really cheap to access, and how they can make their voice heard, what are the ways in which they can fight for their rights, what are the ways in which they can mobilize communities through information dissemination so that these communities can come together and recognize that they have a visible voice by which they can negotiate with the government for better rehabilitation or better rights of their own kind. Mm-hmm. So that's one kind of digital natives. Yeah? Mm-hmm. This is not the general imagination of your digital native.
Yeah,
but these are also people whose lives get significantly affected by the presence of technology. Or if you look at another example, let's say India is right now in the process of building IT cities. We don't have a Shanghai yet, right, which China does, or we don't have a Taipei yet. We have Bangalore, which is supposed to be the Silicon Valley of India, but it doesn't look like an IT city at right now. But there is a plan to build IT cities in India. And one of the cities where I was doing some research is called Ahmedabad, which is in the state of Gujarat, in the extreme west of India, where there is a river that runs through the city. It's called the river Sabarmati. And as a part of the IT infrastructure building, the state wanted to build a skyline, which looks like the Pudong skyline in some form. In the process, they cleared off 80,000 people who lived on the banks of the rivers in informal sectors. These are people who work for digital technologies without us realizing it. We forget that there is a physical infrastructure which is in place, which needs cleaning and constructing and looking after and maintenance, which is an essential part of the glamour and the glitz that technology comes with, right? And these people lost their livelihood, lost their accommodation, lost their housing, lost their communities because technology needed a skyline to be built in the city. Now these people might never have clicked on a mouse, they might not really know what Facebook page looks like, but their lives are still significantly affected because of the presence of technology. So you want to expand the notion of a digital native not only as somebody who is consuming technology, but also as somebody who is affected by its presence in many different ways. There are different kinds of technology ecologies in the country. So we also want to make a claim that technology is not a new thing. Technology is very old. There was print, there was television, there was telephone, there were all different kinds of information technologies which people have had access to differently, right? And that the internet, while it changes things, is not always doing new things. Sometimes it is actually just converging different technologies together and providing access in interesting ways. So when we talk about just access to the internet via broadband, the penetration in India is very, very low. It's about 12.5% of the entire population has broadband access to the internet. But the mobile phone has become one of the most easiest ways of accessing information technologies now. In India, the mobile phone market is huge. For every adult in the country, we have 2 mobile phone connections, right? We're talking about a population of 1 billion and counting. So the phone has become the new interface for access to technologies. I think within the urban setup, we are beginning to see a lot of what you call affective changes of technology. That the presence of digital technologies has started to make people think differently about their own self, but also about their responsibility and engagement with a larger community. So you see a lot of young people especially following a peer-to-peer structure, both within education and outside of it. I teach at a couple of universities in India, and it's interesting that the distinction between the professor and the student is slowly decreasing. That people are beginning to think of the professor not as the single point of entry to information. That most of the students who sit with laptops in the classrooms have access to way more information than the teacher can ever provide in the classroom. So now what does the role of the teacher then? If the teacher's role is not to provide information, what are the new kinds of skills that the teacher needs to develop in order to make the classroom more meaningful? And you realize that the students are engaging in the classroom at a more peer-to-peer level, saying that we are a part of a continued learning process, right? It also leads to interesting questions outside of the classroom, where the young people understand that there is no one universal truth, that there is no only one static knowledge which is prescribed in textbooks, that they are able to engage with multiplicity of contexts, of meaning making, of knowledge production inside and outside of classroom, which is really interesting to see. And you find examples of these in the different kinds of peer-to-peer communities which emerge. For a very long time in a country like India, you always made friends with people who are like us, right? Sometimes it means that you speak the same language, you belong to the same class, you perhaps live in the same kind of housing, you have parents who are educated, things like that. But people are now able to navigate across these different silos to talk to each other in extremely meaningful ways. And this multiplicity of knowledge is available when people participate in questions of governance, when people mobilize communities in order to fight for things which they think are right, and so on and so forth. So in that way, I think the way people think of themselves and the way they think of themselves as engaging with a larger community has been mediated by technology very interestingly in India. Because the state has such an active interest in using technology for betterment, it is often suspicious of people who use technology for entertainment, right? So that they would see that maybe a number of people who spend their lives in gaming or social networking or blogging is almost an abuse of technology because they're not really being productive in building the national good or the economic good of the country.
Can you elaborate on what would be productive then?
Let's say, for example, that the India runs now an e-literacy campaign where school children from a very young age are taught how to use different kinds of softwares for knowledge production, for skill sets, for data operation, for literacy and things like that. That would be a productive use of technology. That this is going to immediately fit into the larger economic ambitions of the country, the political ambitions of the country. But when you spend a lot of time on Second Life trying to create an avatar which doesn't really have any obvious material advantages, then the state starts looking at it with some suspicion, right? But I think over the last 10 or 12 years, the state has started realizing that people's presence on these networks actually leads to very interesting political formulations, which are sometimes in the good of the state. So that one of the most famous political campaigns that was run in India recently is called the Pink Chaddi campaign. The Chaddi is the Hindi word for panties, and it's called the Pink Panty campaign. And this is very specific to Bangalore, but it was a nationwide phenomenon, where in Karnataka, which is the state where Bangalore is the capital, the Hindu right wing came into power about a couple of years ago. And following their coming into power and making the state party, there were lots of attacks on women who either wore Western clothes or went to pubs or were seen in public with boyfriends or smoking or drinking. So there were lots of attacks on women by right-wing fundamentalists. And a young digital native by the name of Nisha Susan started a campaign on Facebook, which was called the Pink Panty campaign, where she invited people, young and old, men and women, straight and gay, to come together, buy pink panties and send them to the political leaders who endorsed these kinds of attacks on women. It was an attempt to kind of reclaim the public space, but it was a new kind of politics. It wasn't the older kind of politics where you got together in a physical space and held hands and held posters and shouted out, but instead she mobilized a very, very large community of people to send pink panties as a sign of protest to these political leaders. And it became one of the most successful campaigns, which eventually led into many interesting feminist groups coming into being, people engaging with questions of what is the public, what is the role of the woman in public, what is the kind of culture that we are trying to endorse, and what are the kinds of safety mechanisms which need to be put into place, and so on. So the government is slowly realizing that while people on Facebook might be spending just a lot of time in networking and maybe playing Farmville, they are also able to start making and mobilizing new kinds of communities which can make very productive and successful interventions which are a part of the constitution of the country.